In the recent years, the Persona series has become extremely popular among the JRPG players. Games like Persona 3, Persona 4 and Persona 5 are considered to be some of the best JRPGs ever made, thanks to their story, gameplay, characters, and so on. In these games, along the real gameplay itself, you can also live the life of a high school student, going out with your friends, reading books, and deciding to start a call for a single goal and then break out on social media in order to start a waifu war. However, the Persona series, in order to become this, has evolved from its first iterations. If Persona 3 and 4 were still describable as dungeon crawler without making it seem like you were committing a sin, Persona 5, while still technically remaining one, started moving away from this genre, substituting dispersive dungeons levels with more linear and curious sections, which made it more accessible to people that weren't into the dungeon crawler genre. However, these three games are considered to be the modern Persona, games that, with the introduction of the social link mechanic, stray further away from the path that the first three games on the series had traveled. So, in the last weeks, I traveled back in the past in order to answer a question that arose to my mind during a day where I just didn't know what to do. How did the first Persona game age? So, in this video, I'm going to talk a bit about my experience with the first Persona game in its PSP remake version, because I wanted to play with not American chapter, if you know what I mean, in order to see how did this game age, whether you did it like milk or like wine. Before starting, a bit of context for those that don't know some basic info about the game. Persona was born as a spin-off to another Atlus series called Shin Megami Tensei, so I hope that you knew that already if you at least have played a Persona title. The first Persona title, named Revelations Persona, was released in 1996 for the first PlayStation in Japan and North America, and as always, as Europeans just had to suffer. And then, in 1999, was also published on PC, but only in Japan. The American version of this game was a mess, can we say? All the characters' names were changed to American names, and Masao also from Japanese became North American. The majority of the references to the Japanese culture were deleted, but not the Shintoist temples. Okay. Then the demon's descriptions and origins were modified, references to American shows and culture were introduced, Mikage-cho was renamed Lunar Veil, the yen was substituted by the dollar, and most importantly, the Snow Queen quest was inexplicably cut off, even though it is still present in the game files and you can still technically play it by using cheat codes. Then there were also changes to the gameplay, with random encounters being not as frequent as they were in the Japanese version, and things in shops costing not as much as in the Japanese version of the game. The more I talk about it, the more of a mess it seems. Or better, it seems like they just wanted to make another game for the Americans, which, if you don't know, is the worst possible way to apply the concept of localization to a game. Then in 2009 the game received a remake for the PSP entitled Shin Megami Tensei Persona, with a more faithful localization to the Japanese version and other improvements over the PS1 version. Persona 1's story and world shows us how this series started out as a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei. This is because of the apocalyptic feeling that the world gives off. The protagonists found themselves in a world overrun by demons, where people die and, when you die, the game says that you were annihilated. If you compare this setting to the one of the modern Persona, you can easily see the differences between them. This game presents two routes, the Sebek route and the Snow Queen one. The first can be considered the real game story, while the second one is just a portion of the story that explains why a certain part of the world, aka the school, becomes inaccessible during the events of the Sebek route. Talking about the Sebek route, apart from taking place in an apocalyptic world, the story has the same development as the most recent Persona games. You are a high school student, you obtain your Persona together with your teammates, you just go around the game world doing stuff, and by the end of the game you end up fighting a god. To actually tell you what happens, during a normal day of school the protagonist and his friends perform a ritual called Persona, after which some of them fall unconscious after seeing a little girl asking for help. In this dream you encounter Philemon, whatever is after Persona 3, and he grants you the power of Persona. After this the group goes to see Maki Sonomura, a classmate that is staying in the hospital, and while the gang is here, Maki has a health issue and she is brought into ICU. While the group waits outside, an earthquake happens and they see the ICU disappear in front of their eyes, while someone screams in the background and then demons start attacking them and the protagonists awaken to their persona. After escaping from the hospital, you encounter Maki's mother, who tells you that all of the pandemonium that is going on in the city is because of the Deva system, a project to which she worked at Sebek, a company headed by Kandori, who wants to annihilate humanity and become a god, and so you head there, wanting to make things go back to normal, and from there the story starts to pan out. This part of Persona 1, which represents around 2/3 of the game, aged kinda okay, but it just gives you the same experience that you would have had by beating Persona 3 or 4, for example, just without the apocalyptic background and the fact that you are traveling through two different dimensions of the same city. What really aged like wine, and is the motive why Persona 1's story is good, is the other 1/3, so the plot twist that happens right after you beat the antagonist of this game, Kandori. If you don't want spoilers, let's just say that while it is something that can be foresighted thanks to some elements that are shown during the game, it still makes for an interesting twist that makes the story more interesting than what it was up until that point, especially if you have played other Persona titles prior to this, which is kind of a given thing unless you are one of those that always wants to start with the first title of the series even when the titles aren't really linked that much. Now for the spoilers part. The twist is that the world we are in was created by Maki, who resonated with the Deva system and got to create her perfect world, a world where she was fine and a sort of utopia we can say. While doing this, Maki's persona split into different personalities that you can see during the game. The ideal Maki, who is the one you have in your party, Aki, her evil part that helps Kandori to carry out its plan, and Mai, her good part that helps you out during the game, of course, only if you have passed the gingerbread house test, otherwise you are unworthy of that. This honestly just makes things way more interesting than what they were before, and I think this is what really makes the game different. There are also some choices in this route that determine your ending and the possibility to fuse the ultimate personas of every character. The other route, the Snow Queen one, just shows you what happens in the school while you are going after Kandori in the Sebek route. In order to unlock this route, you have to do a lot of actions that aren't really that intuitive to do without a guide, even if you, like me, like to talk to everyone in the game before doing anything. I mean, you get to hear about the Snow Queen in the drama club even before going to the hospital, but from there to even think about the existence of a quest about it is not really that logical. To sum up the story of this route, you get to know about the Snow Queen, a real fable by Danish author Hans Christian Andersen, and the legend that the mask of the Snow Queen used for the Saint Hermelin typical annual play was cursed, also because everyone except one person who wore that mask died of unnatural causes. At the end of the steps you need to start this route, you get the hold of a real Snow Queen mask, and let me tell you, you immediately know that something is wrong when you get a mask out of a box sealed with a lot of talismans. Anyway, Seiko, your teacher and the only person to have ever survived the mask curse, finds you and sees the mask, wears it, and unleashes the Snow Queen spirit, which freezes the school and Seiko herself, locking you inside the school. In order to make things return to normal, you need to gather the 12 mirror shards that compose a mirror that will make Seiko return to normal, and in order to do this, you have to beat 3 towers, each of them dedicated to a Greek god. We have Hypnos Tower, Nemesis Tower, and Thanatos Tower, each presided over by a guardian, who are these 3 ghosts that died because of the mask curse. Now, the story of this route is kinda okay, but I find it weaker than the Sebek route. It is just a nice insight as to why you can't access the school during a certain period of time, and it is also a way to characterize some characters that otherwise wouldn't have to even be present in the game. However, the plot per se isn't really the best thing out there. It is surely more a gameplay heavy part of the game that is harder than the Sebek route because of the various time limits that you have to respect in the various towers and the fact that it is damn easy to get the bad ending if you don't look everywhere for mirror shards. Plus, this part is also heavy dependent on XP grinding, but that is a subject I will talk about later on. Both the Sebek ending and the Snow Queen one are kind of anticlimactic and lackluster, but I don't really want to say much about it, just that it felt like something better could have been done for them. There are 2 little lore-related things I want to talk about before continuing with the rest. First, I honestly thought that Igor had always been the master of himself, that he was a supernatural being with nothing over it, as from Persona 3 onwards he has attendees that see him as a master and nothing is shown that would indicate that he is indeed only the mere instrument of another being. Instead, in this game, he defines himself as Philemon's servant, even though he is still the one that resides in the Velvet Room, which would mean that it is possible for an attendee to substitute his master, which would mean that Elizabeth, Margaret, and so on could possibly become themselves a sort of free being from their master control, no? The second thing is that in this game, it seems like everyone can awaken to their persona, considering that various chapters, even not so important ones, have awakened it. This can be proved also by the way the protagonists awaken their persona, just by playing a simple game, and also by some dialogues, like a girl in one of the classroom who, at the start of the game, says that she dreamt about what would seem to be Philemon. While this is honestly a cool concept, I can also understand why, if this is how the matter was intended to be understood as, they scrapped it in the next games by making it only unlockable by certain individuals in P3, a bit like the Genius for Romanticists, if you know what I'm talking about, and then by making it unlockable only under certain conditions in P4 and P5, which would be the acceptance of yourself. After all, can you imagine the difficulty of constructing a story like the P4 one or the P5 one with a world where practically everyone can wake to their persona for no real reason? I can, and trust me, it is hard. I mean, imagine trying to find the killer in P5 if everyone could enter the metaverse just because yes, or how hard would it be for the Phantom Thieves to do their job? Before talking about the chapters, a little question to anyone who has played Persona 1. How the hell is the player supposed to know that Reg is a recruitable character without a guide? How? For those who don't know what I'm talking about, Reggie is this character that appears like once during the story, and that is apparently a recruitable character that you can recruit through a series of actions similar to the one needed in order to access the Snow Queen one. And just like that, nobody really says to you that you can actually recruit him. Apparently, he is the best recruitable character in the game, but I hadn't the opportunity to use it, so I can testify for that. So, the other characters. During the Sebek route, our team will be composed of 4 predetermined characters and a 5th that we can choose between 4 options, a thing that it shares with the Snow Queen route, whose predetermined character, however, are different from the one from the Sebek route. First of all, we, of course, have the typical mute protagonist, just like in every Persona game. Then we have Maki Sonomura, a cheerful girl that, in the protagonist dimension, is sick and passes a lot of time in the hospital and likes painting. Then we have Kain Anjo, a snobbish guy who has a tendency to be cynical and rational, and also to start having philosophical thoughts at the worst time possible. He is one of the recruitable characters in the Snow Queen route. Then we have Masao Inaba, the refuge of this persona, a cheerful and emotional guy who sometimes causes trouble and is also in love with Maki. Poor him. Those are the characters of the Sebek route, while those of the Snow Queen route are Yukino Mayuzumi, an ex-delinquent girl reformed by her teacher, Mrs. Saeko, that now strives to become a teacher and is considered highly by her peers, Yuka Ayase, a Gyaru who is arrogant, childish and a bit too frank, and is also one of the recruitable characters in the Sebek route, and then Hidehiko Uesugi, aka Brown, a jokester that tries to do the playboy but just doesn't understand girls. He is also recruitable in the Sebek route. Then you have other purely optional characters that you can recruit during your playthrough or not, which are only 2. The first is Reiji Kido, a lonely guy who has some harsh manners and is liked by girls for the aura of mystery that follows him, and is only recruitable in the Sebek route. The second one is Eriko Kirishima, aka Ellie, who is an elegant and popular girl that is interested in the occult and is fascinated by what other people find strange. She is recruitable both in the Sebek route and in the Snow Queen one. I would also like to add a thing about her. She is God. Trust me, if you have to pick a 5th member for your party, pick her. Her basic persona has a lot of resistances that come useful during the entire game. Just to make an example, I beat the final boss of the Snow Queen quest with the protagonist, equipped with a persona that could counter the boss's attack, and with Ellie, with her basic persona. Her basic persona nullified everything that boss tried to do to her. Plus, she avoided me a lot of game over by being literally immortal against some demons that were being a problem to my party. She was just looking at them down and saying, "Oh, you pitiful being, you will encounter in my wraith." So yeah, praise be to Ellie, she is God in this game, and her megalomaniac speech at the start of the game is totally justified. The characters are characterized through the various story dialogues and the optional dialogues you can have with them when in a room that can add a bit of personal info to the character. For example, in an entirely optional dialogue, Masao speaks about his situation at home and about his mother, and this happens for the entirety of the party. In general, the characters are really well developed and well written, even Kandori, who, if at the start just seems someone who is evil for the sake of being evil, later on, near the end of the game, acquires a bit of sense. Still, the Snow Queen antagonists, aka the Guardians, are just forgettable, and their reasons for forfeiting their lives to the mask are not that well thought. Apart from Yukino, the Thanatos Guardian, I'm willing to save her. However, I have a thing to say which can be considered spoilers, so be warned. How the hell did the protagonist, who is mute and the only things he does are walking, breathing, and fighting, make true goals fall for him? How did Ellie and Maki fall for this guy? I can understand Maki, I mean, we saved their goddamn life, but Ellie, why? Is it because we are your supportive friends? Is it because you can be yourself around him? Why? This just shows that romance was a persona thing even before the social link mechanics was introduced. God damn it was waifu all along. Now let's talk about the gameplay, and oh boy if it didn't age that well. The game divides itself in 2 parts. The exploration part, where you can explore the city map or the dungeons, and the battles against the demons. Let's first talk about the combat system. The combat system of this persona is in a sort of turn-based SRPG style. You and your enemies are put on an isometric grid divided in 2, one part dedicated to your party and the other one dedicated to the demons. This grid is used to determine the range of the various attacks both teams can cast. Physical attacks, guns and skills have different ranges even between them. For example, there are guns that can hit every enemy on the grid, while others can only hit those in front of the charters. There are also skills that can hit every enemy on the field, and skills that have a predetermined range that can only hit those within it. And just to say, guns are fucking OP in this game. I beat bosses thanks to them. The range of physical and gun attacks is also determined by the position of the character on the grid, and this comes in handy when creating ideal formation, because the game gives us the opportunity to change the default formation of our party to adjust it to our play style. And this can be quite useful. I mean, How could a punch arrive from the end of your grid to the end of the enemy's one? It just doesn't make sense, right? This also makes things more interesting because it lets the player to experiment various formations in order to get the best out of the skills of the character's persona. Moreover, elements can make character change their position on the grid, making things harder for you, and when an enemy is defeated, they tend to come forward, making things easier for the player, at least sometimes. During your turn, you can also use items, guard, or change your persona, which takes one turn to do. However, if you don't want to attack, you can contact the demons, and let me tell you, this is one of the most frustrating experiences in this game, especially at the start of the game, where it just seems like a legalized form of torture. Every demon has 4 moods: scared, angry, eager, and happy. When you contact them, you can use one between the 4 options that every character has in order to cause a reaction, which will be different based on their character's traits that you can see in the contact menu. If you max out their eagerness, you can ask the demon to give you their spell card, aka the persona, which however you can only fuse or not use, some money, or just shoo them away. If you max out their happiness, sometimes they will give you something and then leave, or they will be happy and still fight you. If you max out their angry stat, then they will likely try to assault you and make you lose 1 turn. Finally, if you max their scared stat, they will flee or be scared but still fight you. Then there are also the intermediate states, where these emotions can be maxed out together to obtain other reactions. For example, if you max out the demon's happiness and eagerness, they will throw in some extra items if you ask them to give you something. Now, where do I start with this mess? You have a lot of options. If you have followed my explanation, then you know that I've said that every character has 4 options. That makes for a total of 20 options between which to choose, which are a lot. And only a few between those options increase the eagerness of a demon, so it all resolves into a guess game between 20 options, where you don't know how many are positive and how many are negative. If we guess that 2 between the 20 options give the result we want, then probability tells us that the probability of obtaining the desired result is 2 out of 20, aka 1/10, aka 10% per choice. Using basic probability, we can also calculate how it would be to, for example, have the right choices as the 4th options and so on, but this is not something that we are going to do in this video. Of course, you are not going to pontificate to a gloomy demon, nor are you going to provoke an aggressive one, but it still leaves a lot of guesswork to be done. Moreover, many times the options that work for a demon don't work for a demon with the same traits, which... why? Of course, the more you play with it, the more you understand how it works, and by the end of the game you will probably be able to obtain every persona in the last dungeons, but at the start of the game it is just pure torture. This is one of those things that in theory just work perfectly, but in reality end up being more annoying than anything, and trust me, this is not the only thing that is going to fall under this category. Every time your character levels up, you can allocate 3 points per level into 5 different stats: strength, vitality, dexterity, agility, and luck. This can make you create your personal build of the protagonist. Want it to be a mage? Increase its dexterity. Want it to be a tank? Increase its vitality. This is something typical of dungeon crawlers, and it is a good feature. However, along with your character experience bar, you also have another bar, and that is the persona level bar. What does it mean? It means that you can equip personas up to the level that the persona bar level is. Just why? The problem with this system is that that bar gains XP when you use your persona, but in a game where guns are OP, you find yourself not using them that much. At least I know I didn't, but I have to say that my playthrough was kind of particular. You see, because I had trouble getting personas, I never really created other personas, and my playthrough became a one where I finished the game by only using the basic persona of every character, and many times I just found myself using guns over skills, which made me have a great difference between my character's levels and the persona level that I could equip. In any case, this is another one of those things that function well in theory, but in reality are just frustrating. Speaking of personas, they don't have levels but ranks, and they increase the more you use the persona, and through the increment of rank they can also learn new spells. Then we also have a mechanic in this game that determines the affinity of a certain arcana towards a specific character. This mechanic makes so that it modifies the rank increment of that persona based on the affinity it has with its owner. If it is best, then it will rank up the quickest, while if it is worst, it will need a lot of time to rank up. It's honestly an okay mechanic, I never really had a problem with it, also considering I never really fused that many personas nor used them, but it was only right to mention it. Now let's talk about the exploration part of Persona 1. These are first persona phases where you will need to travel through a dungeon or navigate through the city on a normal map. The dungeons per se are kind of okay, and under this aspect Persona 1 still remains a solid dungeon crawler. Bare bone, with not so many features, but it is still enjoyable nowadays by DC lovers, with some complex dungeons that can be frustrating because of their mechanics. Still, some floors are way more difficult than others, or better to say, way more annoying. Just to tell you one that stuck with me, the Ice Castle Labyrinth, the one filled with stairs. That floor is not funny. It's hell. It is one of the most frustrating things I have ever had to deal with. It made me seriously scream, and for the first time in my life, I think I felt lost in a video game. However, we have to tackle the biggest problem of this game, and the thing that is even more annoying than the Ice Castle floor filled with stairs: the random encounters. The number of random encounters in this game is absurd. You take a step, bang, random encounter. You open a door, bang, random encounter. You go to the bathroom, bang, random encounter. On a more serious note, there are too many random encounters in this game. Okay, JRPGs are known to have an abundance of random encounters, but this is too much. I think I've seen worse only in the original Son of Dragon for Nintendo DS, and damn if that game isn't just pure grinding. My main problem with the sheer amount of random encounter is that the XP scaling is one of the worst I have ever seen in my entire life. It was obviously modeled for an obscene amount of battles, because towards the mid-game you need a lot of battles to level up even once. However, if that was the norm back in the days, nowadays random encounters aren't that much appreciated, mostly because they just consume time in a useless way, and we don't have that much time in our lives. Okay, there are people who really like grinding, and I will never stop being amazed by that, and I will never understand them, and I say that as a JRPG fan, but the majority of us don't really want to waste that much time fighting the same monsters over and over again for an eternity. A good way this thing could have been resolved, and they kind of did it in an infamous PS1 American version, would have been to lower the chance of a random encounter and subsequently adjust the XP scaling along with this change. If you picked two players and made one of them play a version with a better XP scaling and the other one with the original XP scaling, they would have probably made the same progress, just that the first player would have saved some hours, while the others would have needed more hours to navigate through the dungeons and level up. It's just like the pipeline paradox. It just makes things more efficient while still taking up the same quantity of time. It's just that performance is improved because of the modified XP scaling and the adjustment of the random encounter rate. Another way this could have been changed was to have visible enemies on the map, a bit like Persona 3, or a sort of mixed encounter possibility with some being visible on the map and a little percentage to engage in a random encounter elsewhere, an hybrid solution adopted for example by Demon Gaze 2. Now, I don't know whether the PS1 hardware could have made it possible, but yep, the PSP could, just see Persona 3 Portable. Surely it was a design choice by the game developers, but it is an unhappy one nevertheless. So yeah, the random encounters aspect of this game aged like milk and is probably the worst aged thing in this game. Still, I think the difficulty curve of this game was well thought, except for the final dungeons where the difficulty really spikes up, and it is more difficult to live in peace rather than dying because of the random encounters. The game is the shortest one between the various Persona titles, needing only around 20 hours to complete the Sebek route and 15 to complete the Snow Queen route. These numbers of course can be way higher if you want to grind a lot or if you are going to die a lot, but I think that 35/40 hours is the right estimated time you will need to finish Persona 1 stories. However, the game has a relatively high replayability value because of the different ways you can approach the two routes, either to get a different ending or by changing a character and subsequently some dialogues during the game. Now, from an objective point of view, this game already had dated graphics for when it got out. The dungeon textures just seem splashed on the objects, the character's designs is not the best in the world, and shows the scene of time, and the graphics of this game feel old. However, from a subjective point of view, this game honestly survived the proof of the time really well. The characters and demons models are still enjoyable even today, and I could see them still being used in an indie project nowadays. The cutscene can still be appreciated, even if they are kind of clunky and feel a bit outdated. The character designs can be appreciated especially because it is kind of old. It is evident how this game came before the Moe wave of the recent years, and the environments in the various rooms you can visit while being in the third person are really enjoyable. However, the dungeon's textures cannot be saved, they really seem to have been splashed on the wall just not to leave a white space. Now, I don't know whether what I am about to say is controversial or not, because I've seen a lot of people that despise the PSP soundtrack of this game because it is much different from the original one, but I honestly enjoyed it. Yeah, it kind of feels out of place sometimes, like the happy music for the school corridor, and it is honestly the nearest thing to the modern Persona of this entire game, but nevertheless I still enjoyed it. I had to say, however, that I haven't listened to the original soundtrack, so I can't really judge the difference between the two, but I am sure someone on the internet made a comparison between the two. This game doesn't have voiceover, except for the cutscenes where there are actually voice lines by all of the characters, such as our party of Philemon, and that few lines that are voiced over are okay. Shin Megami Tensei Persona is a game that kind of aged badly, all things considered. The story, while being nothing too unforgettable and being also something that Persona fans have already seen in all the other games of the saga, is still enjoyable today, as well as the characters and the dialogues. While the combat system is still enjoyable today, the dungeon exploration and the random encounter experience can be quite nightmarish and hellish, and can be a turn-off for a lot of people who would like to see the origins of the Persona saga. I think that Persona 1 is a game worth to be played only by Persona fans that really want to experience the beginning of the saga to see how it developed with time, or by dungeon crawler enthusiasts and by those that like old JRPGs with a lot of grinding in it. Otherwise, I think you shouldn't even think about getting near this game. If you really want to experience its story, just go watch some gameplays on YouTube. I personally enjoyed, even if not that much to be honest, my time with this game, even though it made me annoyed various times during its duration. However, I am happy to have witnessed what Persona was born to be, and I feel like I have a better understanding of the series now that I've dived deep into its origins. Well, this was a long video, not gonna lie. If you're right here, thank you very much for watching. If you would like to see other videos such as this, consider subscribing to the channel, I would really appreciate it. I don't think I really have that much to say, so yeah, this was all from SigmaOni, and I'll see you guys in my next video.